Hey everyone, welcome back to Adobe Aero for Beginners in a final section before diving into the fun part of this course where we create fun AR experiences. In this lecture, we will go over the behavior builder exploring triggers and actions to bring your assets to life. Feel free to download the exercise files attached to this lecture, open Aero on your computer, and follow along. To start the behavior builder off, we will explore triggers. Triggers are a type of action the user must do to trigger an action from an asset in the experience. For example, first we have start. This trigger allows an action to automatically start once the user opens the experience. Second, there is the tap trigger. This requires the user to tap on an object via their smartphone screen to cause an object to animate the action assigned to it. Followed by tap, there is enter proximity. This is where you set a defined distance, for example, 3 feet, and once the viewer walks within that range of the object, the action assigned will begin to play. On the other side of that coin is exit proximity. This works in the opposing direction. After setting a defined distance and when the user walks out of that range, the object's action will be triggered. For example, if you have an exit distance of 5 feet, once the user walks 5 feet away from the object, it will start animating. Now that we've covered triggers, let's move on to actions and check out how each one works. First, let's add a start trigger, then head over to the starter's assets under animation. Click on the basketball character to add to the scene, then resize smaller to about 15 centimeters. The cool thing about the animation starter assets is they all include embedded animations, which lead us to the first action, play animation. This action will animate a starter or imported asset with an embedded animation. So apply the play animation action to the basketball character and you will see the asset that the action is being applied to, the action type followed by the animation name. In this case, the child is dribbling the ball. Once applied, hit preview to see the action in play. In the action settings, you're able to adjust the length, speed, positioning, and use the infinite option if you want it to loop. If you import your own assets, here is where an FBX file will come in handy to animate your custom characters, something we can explore more in an advanced course. Now head over back to Starter Assets, select an abstract shape, then click on the star, adding it to the scene. This will come in handy shortly. The next action is Play Images. This is useful for GIFs and PNG sequences. Feel free to import the exercise file included in this lecture to test it out for yourself. Once the GIF is imported into Aero, increase the scale to about 45 centimeters, making sure the GIF layer is selected. Apply the Play Images action, then hit Preview to test. Now that we see how Play Images works, we'll delete it for now and focus on the star and the basketball character remaining of the lecture. Next, there is the Play Audio action. This is where you can add ambient music to the experience, voiceover, and helpful audio commands to guide the viewer. You can adjust the volume, choose how many times to repeat the audio, or make it loop by choosing infinite. Now let's delete the action and move on to the spin action. As the name suggests, the spin action will make an object spin on a specific axis. Here in the settings, you can choose to animate on the X, Y, or Z axis, adjust speed, check the infinite for looping, adjust the easing if you want to have a smooth loop or slow down to a rest before it spins again. Now, we have a spinning star playing next to our basketball character. Pretty fun, right? So now that we've seen that, let's delete the spin action and move on. Next, we have the bounce action. Use this to bounce an object up and down, left to right, or vice versa. Once again, you can adjust the speed by adjusting the duration of the action, choose to loop by selecting infinite, and setting the distance of how far you want the object to bounce. Pretty cut and dry. Here, we have the aim action. This is when you want an object to always face the viewer via camera, an anchor, or a specific object in the scene. For this demo, we have the star face the basketball character as it moves. So after applying the aim action to the star, select the basketball character and apply the bounce action. As a note here, you can see in the action box that you have the object with the action it's being applied to, followed by the action label, then the other asset that the action is targeting, in this case, aiming at the basketball character. Now, back to the bounce settings for the character. Let's see how zero point 0.1 seconds look on loop with a 50 centimeter y-axis bounce and make the easing linear for a continuous smooth loop. Whoa, that's crazy. Let's slow down a bit, but you can already see how the star aims at the character in the preview. Let's reduce the bounce distance and give it a duration of 1 second. The next action is show. Pretty much works as a transparency tool when you want to reveal an object in a scene. You can have it appear on screen by scale up, fade in plus scale up, or simply fade in. Feel free to adjust to your desired settings or loop with an infinite option check. Speaking of looping, if you adjust the settings just right, you can have a blinking object. This would be cool with something like a directional arrow. Next, we have the hide action, pretty much the inverse of the show action, but instead of having an object appear on screen, this is used to hide an object, such as welcome message that appears when you first launch the experience. The setting works pretty much as the same as the show action settings. The next action we have is the move action. Pretty easy to figure out what this one does. Just use it when you want to move an object to a specific amount on the X, Y, and Z axis. For example, let's have the star float up continuously by moving the X axis 10 centimeters, 30 for the Y axis, and 2 for the Z axis, and select infinite, then hit preview. Pretty cool, right? So, on to the next action. We have the move to action, which is similar to the move action, but this is when you want an object to move to a specific object or anchor. You can adjust the distance between any objects. The less the amount, the closer that selected object would be to the selected location. As always, you can adjust the duration, easing, and on this action, you're able to add a delay. Next up is the scale action. Pretty self explanatory. This action scales an object by a set amount. An extra note is you may run into this error or hazard icon. This pretty much indicates that you have an action but have not selected an object to apply it to. But you can quickly fix it by making sure you have the object selecting when hitting the action. Now back to the scale action. Let's increase it 5 times its size over 2.5 seconds. Now let's check the infinite option to have it on loop and watch the star continuously grow. On the other end, you can decrease the size by changing the multiplier from 0 to zero point 0.9. Another self-explanatory action is the rotate action. This will rotate an object from its pivot point using the X, Y, or Z axis. Just decide on the degrees you want an object to rotate, and as normal, a full rotation is 360 degrees that you can just plug in here. So let's get nuts and give it a 1 second duration and make the X, Y, and Z axis a 360-degree rotation each. Check infinite, then click preview. Pretty crazy, right? Before we move on to the next action, let's make it linear. And this time we won't delete before applying the next action. Orbit is a super fun action that orbits one object in a circular motion around another. With the star still selected, apply the orbit action and hover over to the action settings to choose the object you want the star to orbit around under center, and select the basketball character. Make the duration 4 seconds, easing linear, choose a direction from clockwise or counterclockwise, then check infinite to loop the action. Here in the action column, you can see the object the action is applied to, followed by the action, then the object the action is targeting. Now, click preview. Pretty cool. We have the rotation still happening, and now the star is orbiting around a basketball character. This shows how combining actions on top of each other can create some fun experiences. So, let's delete all current actions and move along. Now, we have the follow action, which allows one object to chase another. We can see how this works by applying it to the star and set the object to follow the basketball character. Set the distance to about 10 centimeters, duration of 1 second, and easing to linear. Next, select the basketball character and apply a move to action. On second thought, let's do a move action for the character instead. Adjust the Y axis to 40 and 20 for the X, then we'll preview to test it out. Everything looks good, so go to the preview view, and here you have it. The star follows the basketball character as it moves up. Let's head back to the edit screen and delete the current actions before moving on to the next action, wait. The wait action simply delays actions between each other. For example, adding a wait action in the first action column, then a bounce action to the star in a second column next to the wait action. Give a 5-second duration to the wait action, then preview, waiting 5 seconds, then we have a bounce. This last action that we have is a simple one. Open URL. Just select an object, then apply the action, head over to the settings, and type in the desired web address you want the object to lead to. A good practice is typically do not apply to a start trigger, as it will open a web page as soon as you start the experience. I personally like to make it a tap trigger and apply an action like a bounce to a button, indicating that this is a clickable object. So, that is it for the behavior builder. Hope you enjoyed exploring the triggers and actions. Feel free to play a little bit more around with them before moving on to the next lesson if you like. And when you're ready, see you in the next lesson.